That gap between 15 and 40-year-olds is a national disgrace because it exists, and oddly enough, its existence was hardly recognized until fairly recently.
There's no cooperative trial group specifically for this age group. There's a pediatric one and there's an adult one. There's not a training program specifically for this age group. And so there's not a focus, and without focus you can't make progress.
When I was going in there, they have certain protocols that they use for curing ALL, or childhood leukemia, and those are all pretty much geared around younger children. When they bring a person in that's 6'2½", and going through, my body's changing a lot to begin with at that age, to try to modify that type of protocol for someone of my size. Do you just up the chemotherapy? Do you give them different doses? Do you use different types of chemotherapy? How do you change that prescription for someone that's like me?
My doctor here always jokes with me. He says, well, you need to relax, you need to rest. And I'm like, have you met my children? Do you remember them? And I always have to kind of remind them that their advice for somebody who's 60, let other people do your things, relax and all that, doesn't always apply to somebody like me.
I have two kids that are in their 20s now, and I can tell you, the last thing they're going to spend $80 on is calling the doctor, go for a physical, when they don't think there's anything wrong with them.
They may not be able to get to appointments, and they may be worried about missing too much work because they haven't worked for the same company for 20 years. They may be hesitant even at the beginning to get a diagnosis, and that'll impact the delay in diagnosis, which will impact the stage at diagnosis, which could impact their prognosis. And so we have to acknowledge where they are in their life, how they define themselves, how they see themselves. And that is entirely different than the approach we would take with an older adult.
It takes a small army to get me to the hospital. I have to make sure that kids are covered, and we have Cub Scouts and soccer and football, and the one thing that I have been adamant about in all this is that my children are going to grow up with a normal childhood as long as possible.
If one focused their attention and their dollars on this group per se, the likelihood of being able to cure them based on the biology of their disease should increase dramatically right from the beginning, because we know there are younger and older patients with the same diseases that are getting better results.
We have defined a program, we've put it as a part of the strategic plan that's been vetted by the leadership to say this is an important issue and we're going to address it. And I think Dana-Farber has a unique combination of one of the top pediatric hospitals, one of the top adult hospitals, all the specialists, all the researchers, all the psychosocial support. We don't have to build up any of the ingredients, we just need to put them together in a focused way. We absolutely need researchers whose research projects are specifically saying what's different about the biology of a leukemia, a colon cancer, a breast cancer in a young adult versus a younger or an older patient. We need psychologists who are saying, I have to address different needs in this population. I have to address them from a different approach. If I just do a support group, they don't come. We need physicians who, from a clinical standpoint, have experience and have thought about how they might change their care.
If you had $1 to $2 million for each of the 4 or 5 major diseases, you can make a huge impact in really having dollars in a place where no one else's dollars currently exist. Most of us who invest and want our money to have its greatest leverage and do the most good also want some measure to show that when people say, yeah, it's doing great, that we can see it ourselves. The sophisticated donor in this case gets a clear, unequivocal measure of outcome differences. We know how low it is where we start, and we can see the incremental year-by-year improvement in the quality of life and, importantly, at the end of the day, in the increased amount of survival.